The question everybody wants answered from this text is, who is the Israel of verse 26? When Paul says, so all Israel will be saved, is he talking about ethnic Israel or spiritual Israel? In my informal survey of everyone who has something meaningful to say about this, the preponderance of the scholarship is on the side that it's ethnic Israel. The world's greatest living New Testament scholar says that it is spiritual Israel. Probably. I don't know. I have an opinion when I go sit in the red chair. If you want to ask me about it, I'll be happy to find a way not to answer that. But I do know this. God has a deep desire for all of His creatures to recognize Jesus Messiah. And I'm hoping and praying that in God's mysterious will, whether now or at the end of time, He's going to find a way to fold in the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Because that's the way it ought to be. And I'm hoping that you and I will have some part to play in gratefully sharing in God's mystery. After all, Paul says, this turns out not to be just about us. It is from God, through God, and to God, to whom be the glory forever. Amen.
Let's talk. Well, I want to start with just in the deep end, on the deepest question that we've got. If that's okay. It's a deep text. We can start there. We've received 50 texts and emails about this. Why do you wear black?
Deep mystery. Deep mystery. Oh, you want the real answer? Everybody's always curious about that. People have said it's because I don't have any sense of taste. I'm just trying to match. But then my friends have pointed out I'm the only person who can wear all black and still not match. Some of you know I admire monastic values, and one of the things I admire is simplicity, and I started out trying to simplify various things in my life, and my clothes was one of the simplest things to simplify. So that's where I started. I started with my closet, and so I spend very little time thinking about what I'm going to wear. Do you spend a lot of time thinking about what you're going to wear?
I guess it's the same approach on your hair, too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know,
Okay.
I think I misunderstood the nature of this conversation.
Okay, let's go back to the people. You have a special thing tonight. Randy's got a poll where you get to text in your opinion. It's in your hands. We've got a poll up here. Do you believe that Paul is talking about spiritual Israel or ethnic Israel? So take out your cell phone and text us a message. You can text it to the same number. It's 41411. And you'll type cast spiritual if you're going to vote spiritual Israel, and cast ethnic if you think ethnic Israel. Okay? So a little extra stuff for Randy.
I won't be
See, yeah, this is, yeah, Randy's already looking at the live screen. Yep.
Are we supposed to campaign for one side now and see
I don't
if we
know.
can...
It's kind of a we've got spirit. Yes, we do. We've got highways. This is where you come in. Well, let's see if we can find maybe... David Vanderpool. Abilene, Texas asks, how important is the salvation of the Jews for the return of Yeshua?
It obviously depends on how you read the text. My gut reaction would be if in God's sovereign will the salvation of a predominant number of Jews is necessary to the return of Christ, that would not be thwarted by lack of human interest in that. Does that make sense? If that's what God is up to, He's going to find a way to do it. Now, if we're convinced that's what God is up to, then we got to be about that business. You know, I would think we want to be about the evangelization of Jews just as like we'd want to be the evangelization of all sorts of other people. But I am not convinced that the return of Christ is dependent upon our success or lack thereof of doing any particular thing. It could be that God's saving act is going to be an eschatological one. I think evangelism of all people is important, and I think we should have a special interest in Jewish evangelism, just for the reasons that Paul says that we exist because of God's work among the Jews. We grow out of the Jewish experience. You could also say that it would be really crucial for us to evangelize other peoples in order to provoke them, which is part of Paul's argument. And so my basic approach would be, why don't we just go ahead and evangelize them all?
I think you're on target. It takes salvation out of human hands and puts it back in God's hands.
If I understand the text, a lot of the point is that salvation is not in human hands. Neither Gentile salvation nor Jewish salvation was within human grasp. It's part of the power and the mystery of God. I guess I'm trying to put that in a restorationist heritage. That would mean anything to most of the students. I guess that would mean I'm a little reluctant to kind of climb on board with, what would we call that, post-millennial thought that it is going to be humans achieving certain things that are going to lead to the second coming of Jesus. I'm a little reluctant on that.
Okay. Well, let's keep going with that. John Inwood from Abilene, Texas says, how should this text then shape our attitude toward evangelism and missions? What should our response be? And I think you've already answered that. So let's evangelize them all.
Yes.
But are there specific things?
Well, I think that I think there's always a tendency to want to shape or interpret the gospel in terms of one's own group. And I think we have to be constantly giving the gospel away in order to understand it. As we see what the gospel does in Muslim countries, as we see what it does in Jewish countries, as we see what it does in Buddhist and Eastern countries, we come to understand it again. And so I think the imperative for evangelism is not just to save lost people, it is to resave the church as we come to understand what the gospel is really about again.
Beautifully said. Giving it away. Continuing with this, Amber from Austin gives a great question here. She says, given the great rift between ethnic groups in religion, how do you hold on to the hope that God will unite everyone?
my hope's pretty dented right now. I think, you'd have to be made out of pretty thick stuff not to be pretty discouraged about that. And I think I would just want to reaffirm that we do the best we can at that, and that finally is going to be the work of God. That we are just in over our heads, and that it's only by God's power that can be done. But that's really central to the gospel, that Jesus Messiah breaks down the walls that separates people. And if churches aren't about the business of breaking down walls, that is a fundamental misunderstanding of the gospel of Jesus Messiah.
Definitely. And it is something we should be doing. In fact, I think this ties in pretty well and maybe tells us about one of the walls that gets broken down. D. Travis Jr., who's an ACU alumnus from the class of 2006, is listening live in Portland, Maine tonight through a cappella radio. And his question is this: short of traveling the globe, how do you think we best go about sharing with and learning from our international brothers and sisters? More of a practical.
Yeah, I want to say two or three things about that. One would be it's just a lot easier to know a whole lot about the world than it used to be. That's one of the blessings of technology. It's possible to kind of get yourself immersed in all sorts of things. The second thing I'd want to quickly say is those of us who are North Americans live in one of the biggest mission fields in the world. And there are all sorts of places in our culture, ethnic and otherwise, that are fairly untouched by the gospel. And there's some ways to get immersed in a bigger world without going very far, it seems to me. And I'm still one of those old-fashioned people who's a great believer in world missions. I don't think the American church's work in world missions is done yet. I still think we've got something to contribute to the evangelization of the world, and I hope we're going to train and send some missionaries.
Well said. In fact, that might give us pause to look and see where we're at.
See what the score is.
Where are we at on our poll? All right, we're going with spiritual Israel. Okay. Well,
which side did I argue for? I'm trying to gauge my success.
We're going to have a new poll now. Which side did he actually